Thank you, Beth, for doing the recording. Okay, welcome to the Alternative Voting Methods Statewide Task Force September meeting. We did not have an August meeting, but we have action items left over from the July meeting, so that's on the agenda. Prop 131 is on the ballot and has a proposition number, and we're going to look at some ballot examples if Prop 131 were to be implemented. I expect a lot of discussion. Please speak up if you have comments about those things. There are two interesting statutory instant runoff voting timing questions that came up that I thought I'd let people know about, and some questions about a proportional representation campaign or campaigns in the United States. So when you all signed in, you agreed to our meeting norms. I thought we don't have to go through all that. Here are the minutes from the previous meeting. The two action items that we'll talk about in the first agenda item are listed here. We talked about a brokered national convention, kind of did a little thought experiment on that. We talked about some PR, proportional representation advocacy groups, and then you can always access past meeting videos and slide decks. So usually we don't, these aren't formal minutes, but if anybody sees anything wrong on here and wants to correct them, please go ahead and say something. And now we will do some meeting introductions. Beth Hendricks was here when we started the meeting and she started the recording, but I think she's now off. Some of the people who work in the office are Jane Dunk, Katina Frierson. Tony Larson is our liaison to the Action and Advocacy team. I'm the facilitator. My name is Celeste Landry, and I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other's faces for the introduction part. Pat, do you want to coordinate the introductions?
Sure, I'll just kind of go across my screen. I'm Pat
You can go
Venturo.
first. Yeah.
I'm Pat Venturo. I've been on the task force since the beginning, although a fairly silent one. I'm part of the Boulder County League of Women Voters Voting Methods team and have been for quite a while. And as such, obviously, I'm interested in voting methods. So let's move forward. I think next to me on my screen is Louisa Mathias. Could you introduce yourself and your husband?
I'm Louisa. You don't see me because I have a choice. If I use my laptop, I have a camera. If I use the large screen, I don't. And so there's two of us, so you don't see us. But Louisa Mathias, I'm a member of Boulder and LWV. And I'm very interested in the 131, which is why we're coming on, because I understand it, but I can't give the details. So I want to be able to talk to people about it. So that's why I came on.
Okay, great. Betsy.
Betsy McBride calling in from Boise, Idaho. We have your initiative on our fall ballot, and I come to your meetings because you all are so smart and I always learn a lot.
Okay, Jeff? Can't hear you, Jeff. You need to unmute.
That's right. My phone was ringing. Jeff Withers. I'm a member of the Denver League, and I'm also the lead of the local government group with the Legislative Audit Committee or Action Committee. Excuse me, and I don't know much about election methods, so that's why I like to come to these meetings.
All right, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm also with the Boulder League and on the Boulder Voting Methods team. I've been coming to these meetings since the start, and in my time with the Voting Methods team, I've learned quite a lot about voting methods. And I'm interested in getting more people to know about them and hopefully want to use them.
Great. Britta,
I'm Britta Singer from Boulder. I am a member of the league, but I'm a very inactive member. It was 310 that roped me into coming tonight.
good. Wendy,
Hi, go ahead and put my camera on for a minute. Maybe not. There we go. I am on the executive committee of the Colorado Forward Party, and one of our main themes is just kind of fixing democracy so it works, and that certainly includes election reform to get better candidates, more voices, and more choices in our electoral process. Also, we're going to be having a big event over in the Grand Junction area coming up on the initiative, along with Restore the Balance and the university. And so I want to
Great.
make sure that I can answer questions.
okay, Jenny,
Off mute. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Jenny Hopkins. I am from Denver. Have been interested in the League of Women Voters for a long time, but I am more importantly now active in the ranked choice open primaries, ranked choice voting campaign, and I'm interested in learning what you have to say. So I'm excited to listen in.
good, welcome. Maggie,
Hi, I'm with the Arapahoe Douglas Counties League, and I'm just interested in Prop 131.
all righty. And Jesse, haven't seen you in a long time. Jesse, unmute yourself.
I just did. Jesse Cumin, and I started Best Democracy. We work on proportional representation and direct democracy and good governance. I'm curious what everybody has to say about Kent Theory and his proposition, and that was the great attraction. Celeste is always a great attraction.
That's for sure. Well, welcome everybody. We may have some other folks joining us and they'll need, oh, here we go. I may not
You-
say this name correctly.
Do you want me to go next and then
Well, we've got-
Rocio can
Oh,
hear
okay,
what we
whatever.
say? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm the facilitator of this, and I'm also at the Boulder County League, and I'm one of the founding members of the Boulder County League's voting methods team. And along with Jen, I'm the co-leader of it. And I wanted to say Jen is also a professor of mathematics, which comes in very handy sometimes, and she's a gerrymandering expert. And since I'm going kind of last, I get to say all these things people forgot to say about themselves. So Betsy McBride is a former state league president in Colorado, and now she's like the co-president in Idaho. And you heard her say that Idaho is going to have the same sort of Prop 131 Final Four voting initiative that we're having here. So yeah,
And now Rocio.
we're doing introductions.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Rocio. I'm just a student at Front Range Community College here in Boulder County, and I'm a political science major, and I'm just here to really get a better idea of alternative voting.
Great.
Rocio,
welcome,
how did you
Go
how did
go
you
ahead,
hear
Celeste.
about this meeting?
I saw it on your website on the calendar, and I
Great.
just was like, I want to just pop in and get as much information as I can.
Wonderful. Welcome, welcome. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And we can continue on with the meeting. You should see the meeting introduction slide right now. Is that correct?
Yes.
And now upcoming events. So here are some things that you all might want to know about. If you live in the Estes Park area, I will be giving a presentation on how Final Four voting, which is on the ballot this fall, works on Wednesday. And we'll actually do in a sample election. And then a similar thing, a conversation will happen in Durango. That's on Tuesday, October 15th, from 8 to 9. I think it's 8 to 9 in the morning. I don't think it's 8 to 9 in the evening, but I need to check on that. And Deborah Lykin will be leading that discussion. So if you live in either of those two areas, you're very welcome to join those events. This Saturday, the 21st, is Making Democracy Work Day in Colorado for the league. And we used to do these in person, but since the pandemic, we have done these on Zoom. And the Prop 131 major backer, Kent Theory, is going to be a speaker at it. So, and I think Kent Theory is early in the morning. I hope so, because I have a flight to catch. So I want to catch that. I don't want to miss my flight, and I want to hear Kent Theory speak. Also, the former Denver elections director, Amber McReynolds, she's now one of the United States Postal Service Board of Governors. So they're the ones that have some control over Louis DeJoy. I don't know if she'll get any questions about that, but anyway. And she is also a backer of Prop 131 and has been since basically, since it was still in the initiative process. Every month there is a PR 101 webinar that Fair Vote Canada does about proportional representation. Fair Vote Canada is very different from Fair Vote in the United States. So you should try not to confuse those two. And then, of course, November 5th, we have a general election. Is there any other event that we should announce while we've got the event screen up here?
If you're going all the way into October, there's an event in Grand Junction on the initiative. Kent Theory may be speaking there, but it will be October 17th in the evening, put on by Restore the Balance and the university.
October 17th, Grand Junction, Restore the Balance. If I go to Restore the Balance, I'll be able to find it, you think?
You will probably find a save the date and the time, but they don't have the agenda up because we're still confirming who's going to speak.
Okay, great.
And I would add one more in case if it's of interest. I don't have exactly the details on next Sunday, which I think is the 23rd. Let me check in my calendar, 22nd. We are going to do a showing of the new documentary Majority Rules, which tells the story of the vote in Alaska. It's going to be a Zoom at 6 p.m. in the evening. I would love to get the information if anybody's interested in joining. Just sign in. It's about a 90-minute. I have previewed it. I'm sure you guys are all experts, but it is a nice tutorial and it is a nice review if you haven't seen it.
6 p.m. September 22nd via Zoom. And who's sponsoring it and how do you sign up?
It is through the campaign, and we are working with a organization called Kinema that publishes that allows us access to the documentary, and they haven't given me the web link yet. So if there's anyone I could send it to afterwards, I would love to do that and let people know about it. I apologize. I didn't know I'd have a chance to show it tonight. I have been frantically trying to track down this link though.
So I heard that there are going to be like 4 days when anybody can watch it online.
So that is true. That is correct too, through Fair or Represent Us is doing that. And those 4 days are this, let's see, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Saturday through Tuesday.
So maybe I'll send this out to the people who are on this email list and they can watch it.
They can do it either way.
Yeah.
Can.
Okay. I just, as a member of the league and as somebody who worked really hard on the national concurrence on voter representation and electoral systems, we do have a bit of a problem with the word majority because no voting method that has three candidates can guarantee a majority. And we worry that too often these IRV, instant runoff voting, or forms of RCV, they all say, oh, you guarantee a majority winner, and you don't no voting method can guarantee a majority winner. So we push back a little bit against that, just to let you know, Jenny. But we're certainly
I appreciate the clarification. Thanks.
okay. I asked somebody who'd seen it. I haven't seen that movie, that documentary yet, and they said they don't actually talk about majority that much. So, but it does make for a snappy title. So
I think it is maybe more title. I would say I have seen it. They do talk about majority versus a plurality. There is some discussion in there, so I would tell you that, but not a lot. It's not the focus of
Okay.
the initiative at all.
Okay, I have a slide in here that I can show you about. It's right now it's hidden, but I can show it to you about majority. But maybe we won't worry about it too much unless we have enough time. Okay, if there's no other event people want to talk about, there's some news and there's a recording to share with you. The Secretary of State has changed the instant runoff voting rules so that the county clerks are no longer required to do batch elimination, and this surprised Boulder voters when we had our mayoral election in 2023. So that is a good thing. Some people would say the county clerk should be required to do sequential elimination. That means eliminate one candidate at a time, as opposed to batching candidates and eliminating them all in one step. And then there's also this 1-hour webinar about analyzing mismarked ballots and rejected votes in ranked choice voting. And they talk a lot about the Alaska election. And it's interesting because Alaska had not that many mismarked ballots, whereas San Francisco, which has been using instant runoff voting for a long time, had a higher rate of mismarked ballots. So it may be a lot of it dependent on education. I know Jen Clellan on this call has also done some analysis of the Alaska ballots. And found that
about the mismarking, but definitely noticed there was like maybe a 2% rejection rate for invalid ballots.
and you found that they did better in the second election, right? After they had some
Yeah,
practice.
that was in the special election, and then in the general election in 2022, they did better.
Yeah, Jenny?
Is that 2%? I'm trying to understand, is that the higher number or the low number?
The higher number. So in the
Okay.
special election, about 2% of ballots cast were just tossed and never counted because they were invalid in some way, either from overvotes or mostly overvotes.
And Jen, just so I benchmark me, I'm trying to learn here. What is a normal mismarked ballot or pitched ballot rate in a traditional election?
That's a great question, and I don't know. So I don't have strong feelings about whether this is, I mean, obviously we would like to have this be 0 because, sometimes close elections are decided by less than this. So my sense is that it's more than a typical plurality election, but I don't know how much more. And
Somebody asked,
this paper that Celeste linked to, I bet has a lot more information than what I know.
there's a paper and the webinar. So, yeah. Let's see if yeah, okay. And they know a lot of stuff. It was pretty impressive. So, yeah, okay. Let me keep going. Okay, so the next meeting date's going to be October 20th. The week before that is Yom Kippur, and we always meet the third. Usually we try to meet the third Monday anyway, so it all works. Okay, first agenda item from July.
So Celeste,
Yeah,
that Monday is the 21st, not the 20th.
thank you. We will fix that. I think it's right in the website calendar, but okay. Okay, So going to the agenda, the first agenda item is catching up from the July meeting. And we had two action items which are kind of related to proportional representation. So first, let's look at what proportional representation actually is. You are electing a body. Jen, if you'd like to do this, I'm totally happy to have you explain this.
You're
Pie
just
chart.
as good at it as I am. Go for it.
But I do a lot of talking, so okay.
Okay, fine. I'll talk. So, if you're from Boulder, a typical example of this is the way we elect our Boulder City Council, where we're electing 5 people at a time. And because we use a non-proportional voting method called block plurality, what tends to happen, even though our elections are nonpartisan, but there are often slates based on, whatever is the issue of the year, where people will be on different side. And while it doesn't always happen, a typical result is that one slate will win all 5 seats because of the voting method that we use. Whereas if we used a proportional method, and then each slate would tend to get seats roughly proportional to, their share of the electorate in terms of how the electorate felt about it. And the slide here is indicating that those voter preferences among these 3 different color patterns, if you were proportional, would probably translate into 1 seat for the yellow squares and 2 seats for each of the other 2. But in a block plurality system, the group that has the largest share of the vote, even though it's a minority share of the vote, because it's the largest, would get all 5 seats.
That's what plurality means. It's more than the others, but it doesn't mean a majority. It doesn't mean a supermajority. It's just more than the others. Our first past the post, 40 is more than 38, 40 is more than 22. So like a horse race. Okay, so PR or proportional representation came up at the national convention because there was a multi-winner election, and we realized that the national bylaws are not conducive to proportional representation. So Deb McCormick from Maine, whose candidate actually won one of these multi-winner seats, she's asked us to go and look at our bylaws to see if anything refers to a majority winner, because we probably want to get that language out for 2 reasons. One, because you can't guarantee a majority when you got more than 2 candidates. And secondly, because proportional voting methods don't want majority winners. They're not looking for them. So the plan is to update the state bylaws and then go to the national bylaws. So Jeff, thanks to Jeff, who's on this call, for looking through the bylaws and sending me the entire set of bylaws, which is only 8 pages. It's not too onerous. Do the state bylaws refer to a majority winner? No. Here are some sentences, from the bylaws. The directors shall be elected for a 2-year term, but they don't say how they're going to be elected. No details. There is an interesting statement. It says each delegate shall be entitled to 1 vote only at the annual meeting, even though the delegate may be attending in 2 or more capacities. We probably want to change that to ballot instead of vote, because a ballot, you may want to have multiple votes on a ballot, but that's like a little trivial side thing. And then they do talk about a 2/3 vote to amend the bylaws, but that's very appropriate to have a yay or nay, choose one for amendments. So we're pretty much set here. We don't have any constraints in the state league, and Jeff did his homework. Thank you, Jeff. Neil McBurnett, and then was going to work with Ruth from the California League about making proportional approval voting an online election option. Neil is on a plane right now, I think, and he didn't say whether he did this or not. I'm guessing it might not be done yet. But at the national convention, the league uses online voting, and it's not very sophisticated. So it knows about plurality block voting, that non-proportional kind of voting that Jen was talking about. Deb is probably working on online proportional RCV options, but while we're talking about different forms of PR, let's go ahead and try out proportional approval voting if somebody wants to work on it. So Neil wanted to work on it. We'll see what kind of progress he's made next time we chat with him. So just to let you all know what approval voting is, you have multiple candidates, and even if you're only electing one candidate, you can vote for as many as you want. If you're electing more than one candidate, you can still vote for as many as you want. Betsy.
So, do you have a sense of what the variations would be that need to be represented? Would it be large leagues versus small leagues, red states versus blue states? What would be the kind of different representation we'd be thinking of?
So for the example that came up in the nominating committee, I think there were 5 members for the nominating committee. So I don't know how, I think people usually self-nominate, or the nominating committee, you know, asks people, will you run for this? There's not much proportional representation or need for it, because it's usually you got 3 positions to fill and you find 3 people to fill them, and you have a slate you nominate and it gets voted up or down. So I think it's more in terms of Deb McDonough's thinking. I think it's more the league should be practicing what it preaches, and so that's what that's where I think this is going right now. I don't know that there's a lot of, and then once we're practicing it in the league, we can encourage cities and states to adopt proportional representation. I think I got Deb's name wrong here. It's not McCormick, it's McDonough. I'm pretty sure. I will check on that. Okay. And there are different kinds of proportional approval voting, and the kind that Neil has a particular one in mind, which he can talk about at some point. Okay. This is the part I think a lot of the people on the call are interested in. So at the talk I'm going to give on Wednesday, I'm going to actually go through some ballot examples of Prop 131. So just to review this, and these slides are on the League of Women Voters Alternative Voting Methods Task Force webpage. And I'm going to make a few changes, like fix Deb's last name and put up a better set of slides after this meeting. But this slide I don't think needs to change. So Prop 131 is about final 4 voting. So the June primary would change, the November general election would change. The June primary would become an all candidate primary. So all the candidates run, all the voters, no matter what party or unaffiliated, get the ballot. And you would choose one person, one candidate, but the top 4 vote getters would advance. This would apply to all the federal elections except for president, all the state elections except for district attorney. It would not apply to county elections and nonpartisan elections like city council and school board. It would apply to state school board because that is partisan and it's a state election. So the June primary would be an all candidate choose one primary. And then in November, it would be, you get to rank up to 4. It would be a single winner election, and we would use instant runoff voting tabulation. So let's look at, here's the primary. The current situation is we have partisan primaries. You choose one and a single winner comes out from each primary. And unaffiliated voters can choose to vote an R ballot or a D ballot. What's proposed is an all candidate choose one primary that I already talked about. So all the voters can participate, all the candidates can run. Let's look at some ballots. Here is an actual part of a ballot from Boulder County. It's the 2018 Democratic Party ballot. You can see, I'm just curious, what do you all notice about this ballot? Any observations people want to make?
4 candidates for governor.
Okay, is that unusual?
I don't know.
I don't see affiliations.
It's the
Usually-
Democratic primary
Oh, okay,
ballots.
the primary,
There are
sorry.
no
It
affiliations
usually
because
takes-
it's the Democratic primary ballot.
Sorry
Usually
about that.
takes 30% to get onto the ballot at the convention, state convention.
But this is the
Yeah,
primary.
so Jesse's talking about the party assembly
Mhm.
and when they vote, when the party members at the assembly vote, you get to choose one, and if you get 30%, then you can get on the ballot.
It makes it
Um,
mathematically impossible for 4 candidates.
Correct.
Yes.
So how did 4 candidates get on, Jesse?
Signatures.
Yes. So one thing that happens is anybody who goes through the assembly, and if you get more votes than anybody else who went through the assembly, you get top line on the ballot. And then the people who only collected signatures, they're bottom line on the ballot. So it looks like Mike Johnston only collected signatures. Any other things you notice?
An awful lot of uncontested seats.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I once told my daughter she didn't have to vote in the primary. All of the seats were uncontested except one candidate had a write-in opponent. And I told my daughter she didn't have to, she was in another state. You don't have to vote your ballot. I was a little shocked at myself that I gave her that permission, but I did. Okay, let's look at the Republican ballot. Do you notice anything here that's worth mentioning?
Couple offices don't even put a candidate up.
Well, this is Democratic dominant Boulder County, so yeah, it's not too surprising.
I know, I actually lived in Boulder for a while, so I do know.
Okay, so none of the names are the same on these. Let's go ahead and look at what I made up a all candidate ballot. So here you can see lots of names, and look, they've got the party labels. The other one, somebody said no party labels. So if you're looking at, let's look at the first US Congress District 2. We've got a libertarian, we've got an independent, I think that means unaffiliated.
Okay.
We have a write-in candidate. Okay. We actually didn't have a write-in candidate here, but this write-in candidate came from the general election in 2018, because what's going to happen if all the candidates, if the entry point is the primary, you can't bypass the primary and go straight to the general, which is what Nick Thomas did. It's what Roger Barris did, and it's what the write-in candidate did. So that's a little different. What about the governor's race?
Folks,
You think there are enough candidates on the governor's race?
The more the merrier.
So we have we had 8 for Republicans and 4 Democrats. We have a couple more here. Yes, Jenny,
Quick question, what determines the order?
it's
On-
random. According to
Oh, it's
Prop
right, it is.
131, it will be
Yep.
random.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you.
whereas it wasn't random in the previous one, right? If you went through the assembly, you got the most votes, you were at the top. If you went through collected signatures, you were at the bottom. Okay, we didn't talk very much about the others, but these are
What-
all,
What about the affiliations? The initiative in Idaho, you can list them if you want, but it's not required.
that's interesting. Here, you would be you are listed with it.
Okay.
Yeah. And so some of them, so what will happen with the Secretary of State's office? Who's going to advance to the general election? How many advanced? Do you remember?
Everybody.
Or, so they'll
Not
all,
everybody, 4 advance, but in this case, that's
Right.
everybody.
everybody, right,
So for governor, only 4 will advance out of the 10. For
Okay.
Secretary of State, all 4 would advance. And I know Blake Huber, who's running, he's actually running this year for president under the Approval Voting Party. And in 2018, he ran for Secretary of State under the Approval Voting Party. And, you know, he's my friend. And I would probably, if I had this ballot in 2018, I'd probably vote for Blake Huber just because this vote doesn't really matter. It just tells people, I don't know what it tells people. People can vote however they want to in this election because all 4 will advance. It's the next election that's going to matter. So one of the things that, like, in you know, for governor, whoever won the governor's race, that person was the Democrat. Whoever won the Democratic primary was heavily favored to win the governor's race overall. But here, we could have multiple Democrats winning this primary and going on to the general, and the general only one can win. So State Board of Ed, both of those will continue on. Not very interesting there. Any other comments on the ballots? On the ballot here?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
There are party affiliations are listed. If I petition on, I have to designate a party?
No, well,
Right now you do. If you petition onto the primary, you do petition via a party. For these offices, these are all partisan offices.
So the party has some, the party gets to decide whether I can petition or not? How does this work?
but you can declare
Registered,
unaffiliated, I think.
yes, you
I-
can also,
Oh, okay, thank you.
yeah, you can
I-
declare unaffiliated or you can do it as a party with a party
There's-
label.
There's a couple of things to be aware of there.
Mm.
A person can get signatures under any party name, which frankly, I don't think is right because the party should have to agree with them. But if you wait until after the primary, you are either unaffiliated or a minor party. It has
So
to be
Wendy, I think that you have to,
you have to be
if you-
you have to be a party member. Yeah.
yes, you have to be a party member and you can only collect signatures from people in your party.
Right, in the major parties, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but unaffiliated can collect from anybody.
Correct.
Okay, so there are a couple offices that are not here. I mentioned district attorney, US president, and county offices. So was a Boulder County ballot that this was based on. So in Boulder County, we had a contested JD20 district attorney race. You can see in the bottom right here, Mike Foote versus Michael Doherty. So that's not going to change. So I'm not sure why the Prop 31 proponents did not include district attorney. I think it just adds confusion. Amber McReynolds agrees with me on this, but that's what they did. This is a statutory change, so county clerks may be asking for some statutory changes. I don't know. So yeah, so D and U voters would get a separate primary ballot for that because, and I think the other uncontested races would appear on it because right now they appear. So the county commissioner race at the bottom of the screen would also be on that ballot because they're already printing the ballot anyway, so they would do it. But you can see that for district attorney and the county offices, for the Republican primary, there's either 1 or 0 candidates. So as far as I can tell, the Republican voters would not get a separate primary ballot. So all the U voters, all the unaffiliated voters would vote a Democratic ballot if they want to weigh in. So, okay. Any other questions on the primary? You can ask anytime, but I'm going to move on to the general election if we're ready. Okay, so the current situation with the general election is we have a choose one contest, and if the seat is safe for one party, then the outcome is basically predetermined, right? We all know this. Under the proposed system, the primary only advances 4, so there is no predetermined outcome with the new primary system. And in order to prevent spoilers and vote splitting, we would use a better voting method than terrible choose one plurality. And we would use a ranking method where you rank up to 4 candidates because there are 4 candidates on the ballot. And we would use instant runoff voting tabulation, which is the most common form of ranked choice voting. But we're the league, so we use the specific name because RCV can mean many different things. I forgot to announce that our What is RCV Anyway article got published in the Fulcrum online, so it's now out in the world. Here's a ranked voting ballot. And you put it says mark no more than 1 box in any column or row, and that will prevent you from spoiling your ballot. Let's look at the general election ballot from 2018, the actual one, and then we'll compare it to the what it would look like if it had been final 4 voting. So you can see for the member of the U.S. representative from CD2, they had a write-in. Write-ins won't be allowed. We'll just go back and forth here. So U.S. rep, and then here's U.S. rep, and you can see 4 candidates, same 4 candidates, but no write-in. And then you have to fill in 1 oval per column and 1 oval per row. You actually don't have to. If you want your vote to count, you only have to fill in a first choice. And then if you want to, you can fill in a second. And then if you want to keep going, you can fill in a third. But okay. Let's look at the next one. So lieutenant governor, governor, and lieutenant governor. There are 4 candidates on the general election. And there would be 4 on the new general election ballot. But I went and looked at the numbers of how many votes people got, and I think that Kerry Kennedy would also have made this ballot, and Victor Mitchell would also have made this ballot. And one thing that has to happen is if you advance from the primary to the general election as a gubernatorial candidate, you have 7 days to get your lieutenant governor lined up. And then the lieutenant governor's name would appear on the ballot with you. And since Kerry Kennedy and Victor Mitchell were under the old system and they lost to Polis and Stapleton, they didn't get to name a lieutenant governor. So I just put question marks there for this one. Okay. So a lot of these have about four candidates in the actual election because we have pretty active minor parties in Colorado. The Libertarian Party was started in Colorado. And then we have 4 candidates in most of these elections also. So I don't know if people have comments. There's still some where Deborah, there's still somewhere you have only one candidate.
Sorry I was late. I just have a question about if we had this final 4, who is it that decides the party? So is the party deciding if this is a Democrat, or do you self-define as a Democrat or a libertarian or whatever?
That was a very controversial thing that was discussed, and many different versions of this initiative went through the title board. And in the end, there's no change. There were 2 ways to get on the ballot before, and there are still 2 ways to get on the ballot now. The 2 ways to get on the ballot are 1, through a party assembly or party convention if you're a minor party, or so basically a political party meeting and a vote at the political party, or collecting signatures.
And if you collect signatures, you can define yourself as a Democrat?
You have to be registered by January 1st of the election year as a Democrat, in order to run as a Democrat.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. And then, so all of the first 2 columns here are all affected by the final 4 general election, the final 4 voting new process. This 3rd column are the state offices and the county offices that are not affected by final 4 voting. So none of the county offices are affected. So you can see that we have a lot in Boulder, a lot of uncontested offices at the county level. The district attorney, there was somebody running in the primary, but that person, because the district attorney isn't included in final 4, Michael Doherty was running unopposed, even though it's a state office. And then RTD director is listed as a state office, but it's not partisan. So you can see there's no party label next to Lynn Geisinger's name. So, and then you notice that the state senator for District 16 only has 3 columns, because you can guess why. There are only 3 candidates. Actually, if there are 3 candidates, you don't need a 3rd column. 2 columns is enough, because whoever you don't list first or second ends up being your 3rd candidate, but your ballot never gets to them because either your first or your second choice will end up being in the final round. One thing that's very interesting is that they do sequential elimination. They do not do any batch elimination. They do not declare, the final 4 voting does not declare a winner based, if you look at Attorney General, suppose Joe Salazar got 90% of the first choice rankings. He still doesn't get elected in the first round. They delete the lowest vote getter, and then redistribute those eliminated candidates' votes, and they do a second count. And Joe Salazar doesn't lose any votes. He might gain, he might get 91% of the votes. And then they take the lowest vote getter of the 3 remaining candidates and redistribute that candidate's votes. And then they have 2 candidates remaining, and then Joe Salazar is finally announced as the winner. So that's not how this is normally done. I'm not sure why they wrote that in there. I can imagine that the legislators, if this passes, they will, the county clerks will say, forget this, can we just declare the winner in the first round? So I anticipate a lot of statutory tweaking if this passes. And then a lot of you probably know that there was a bill introduced at the last minute, an amendment to the elections bill introduced at the last minute that says that you can't do instant runoff voting at the state level until you've successfully done it in 12 different municipalities, and they have to be different sizes, and they have to have different demographics, like racial demographics, I think, and language demographics. So yeah, very interesting. But Jared Polis signed that bill. It's SB 24-210. He signed it and he said, I'm going to work with the legislature if the voters pass this to make this happen sooner rather than later. So Jared Polis is a fan of the Final Four voting. Okay.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Is that what you described? Is that what you called instant runoff voting tabulation?
It is instant vote runoff voting tabulation. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There are many kinds of tabulation in the RCV world, but single winner, the only kind that's used right now in Colorado is instant runoff voting.
Thank you.
I'm going to tell you all a little vignette that Boulder, Colorado used the proportional form called single transferable vote for 30 years. And the house that I live in was a voting place for the very first single transferable vote election in 1917. Kind of excited about that. Okay. We'll move on to more about instant runoff voting and some statutory questions. And if you think of something you want to ask about Prop 131, go ahead and speak up whenever you want to. So I went to a Littleton City Council meeting, and they talked about approval voting and instant runoff voting. And the city clerk pointed out that there's a conflict with the deadlines. So a municipality must request that a county conduct an IRV election, but they have to do that. Their deadline is before the candidate filing deadline. So are you going to know if you have an IRV election or not? If you only have 2 candidates, look back here. The State Board of Ed race for CD2 has only 2 candidates. Do you see first, second, third there? No, of course not, because there are only 2 candidates. So it's a simple choose one, which makes sense for 2 candidates. So here's the actual paraphrased election language and the citations. So the municipality has to notify the county 100 days before the IRV election, but the candidate only has to file 64 days before the election. I wonder if this came up in Broomfield, because Broomfield was gearing up to do instant runoff voting, or IRV, you can call it. And then they canceled the IRV election because they had no more than 2 candidates for any of the offices. So it may not be an issue. Maybe you just make sure you you notify the county 100 days before, and then the county can always cancel the IRV election. I don't think they have a problem doing that, but this seemed to concern the Littleton city clerk. So the second timing question is about coordinating IRV elections. Coordinating means the county clerk runs a local election, and they do it, you know, usually during the normal election November timeframe. So House Bill 241071 is what required county clerks to conduct IRV elections. The question is, they talk about a coordinated election, and we usually say general election for even year elections, and we say coordinated election for odd year elections. However, Boulder is scheduled to move its municipal elections to even years beginning in 2026, and they will want to know what if they're going to have to run their own election or if the county clerk will run it. The way I read the Colorado Revised Statutes, coordinated election doesn't say odd years anywhere. That's the way I read it. I talked to somebody in the Secretary of State's office who made this comment that the county clerks only have to do these IRV elections in odd years. And they're a little busy dealing with the overseas voter ballots right now, but after that deadline is passed, which I think is this weekend, I'm gonna bug that person again to clarify this situation, because this would be, I like to get the details right. You know, if we try to implement something and we don't do it carefully and well, it looks really bad for the elections people, and then you start getting election conspiracy talk. And it also looks bad for better voting methods advocates, and we don't want that to happen. So, so there you go. Okay. Any questions on any of the things we've done so far?
Yeah, I have one that's maybe just sort of a clarification. Since 131 is really a two-part, one for all candidate primary and the other for how to run the election afterwards, I'm assuming that they're both going to go together. So if it passes, then you have to wait forever to do an all candidate primary that's associated with the IRV, or am I wrong? Would they, if it passes, would they do an all candidate primary, but just a plurality election at the end?
They're tagged together.
Okay.
I've not heard anybody suggest separating them. I think you could have an all candidate primary, but then, I mean, you don't want to have 4 people in every contest if you don't have a better voting method. You know,
they could want that for sure.
They could do something like use approval voting in the general election, and then they could implement it right away if they got around to writing the simple rules to implement it. Deborah, you had your hand up, but maybe you took it down.
No, I do still. So I
Okay.
have two questions, but I don't know if you want to address either of them in this meeting. So the first question is, I'm still confused on how we count ballots to decide about a majority. So there seems to be some debate about whether this method of electing candidates will really ensure that the candidate elected has a majority of votes. And I don't know if you want to go into the detail of explaining that, but I'm still confused about that. And the second thing I'm confused about is we want a election system that's transparent and that voters trust. And I still don't quite understand what are the problems with doing a risk limiting audit on this form of voting.
Okay. I have a slide to show you, and I see that there are a bunch of things in the chat which I'm not able to look at right now. So Jeff, if you see anything there that I need to pay attention to, please speak up. Okay, first question is about majority. So this was a slide that I had hidden. Whoops. There it is. Talking about majority. So first of all, people throw out the word majority and they don't. And what does it mean? I mean, I'm a math teacher and you always calculate a majority of something. You calculate a majority of a number. So here are three different kinds of majority that you can talk about, especially with IRV, instant runoff voting. So the first one is majority of active votes in the final round. And this is always true for instant runoff voting. This means that all the votes that are still in the final round, the winner has more than the loser in the final round when there are only two candidates left. Or if there are four candidates, you still have more of the votes than all the other candidates combined. So that's true.
The final round is after you've already, the people who chose that one candidate as their first choice, they're not in the final round, right?
If you picked somebody, if you only picked one number one person and you didn't pick anybody else, and your candidate is eliminated, then that means your ballot is called exhausted. You no longer have an active vote. So you're not included in this denominator.
Okay.
But
if you chose 4 and your number one choice is one of the two candidates in the final round, that's considered one of the active votes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Your vote continues to count for your first place candidate for as long as that candidate is still in the race.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So what happens sometimes, I mean, should not be a big problem in Final Four voting because there are only 4 candidates to rank, and but this happened actually in Alaska. There were only 3 candidates to rank, and you could write a write-in, but write-ins don't usually make a difference. There were 3 candidates, and Nick Begich was eliminated, and half of his votes went to Sarah Palin, if I recall correctly, and about a quarter went to Mary Peltola, but a quarter were exhausted. So it turns out that nobody got 50% of the votes cast in the initial round. And that's number 2. And that's when people think of a majority of the votes in the election, you usually think of all the ballots cast and, with votes on them. And that seems like the common sense definition. But this is true also for other voting methods too. Like you don't necessarily get a majority of valid votes cast. And this is why the League of Women Voters worked so hard to get the majority criterion removed before the National League adopted a position. Here you can see that, every voting method has flaws. No voting method is perfect. And IRV's biggest weakness is frequent majoritarian failures, according to a couple political scientists who study this a lot. Who Jen knows because she's been on panels with them about the politics of math and the math of politics and stuff like that. And then the third type of majority is fascinating because this is a majority of ballots cast. And when Broomfield adopted instant runoff voting, it said Broomfield voters adopted instant runoff voting, RCV, whatever they called it, with 49% of the ballots. Or with 49%. I don't know, remember if they said votes or ballots or what, but it meant 49% of the ballots, because if you had looked at votes cast, there were more votes in favor of passing it than against passing it, but a lot of people left it empty. So even when you have a yes/no ballot measure, you could argue there's a third candidate, which is leaving the contest blank. And in France, this is often a protest vote. It's called a white ballot, and you just leave it blank. So anyway, these are the three kinds of majority. Did we answer that question for you, Deborah?
Just one clarification. So do you mean that this way of voting is worse than the current way of voting in terms of frequently electing someone who doesn't have a majority?
No,
I
it's
think
it's
so.
better than the current method
Okay.
because they split votes and nobody gets a majority, you know? I mean, at least in IRV, you get a majority of the active votes in the final round, and you can have a second choice if your first choice is eliminated and things like that. So, yeah. So you have another question about transparency, but maybe Betsy wants to ask her question right now.
So we had a mini debate in Boise last week, and the opposition went hard on this question with all kinds of citations related to the Alaska outcome.
Yeah.
They're really using this discussion.
I think that the pro 131 folks should not be pushing hard on majority, because it's instant runoff voting is a better voting method. You don't need to use a term that is not well defined, and so I think they're hurting their cause. And when the title board was considering this initiative, a couple of us state league people wrote letters to the title board saying, please don't use the word majority. And you'll see the blue book does not use the word majority. The only time it uses the majority is you need a majority vote to pass Prop 131. That's the only time majority appears. Yeah. Anything else you wanted to say about that, Betsy? I agree that majority is a very problematic term. Okay, Deborah had another question about transparency. And so let's talk a little bit about, say, this U.S. House of Representatives District 2 contest. You mark your first choice, and what happens is, I think Joe Neguse would win in the first round. I mean, because of the way the Final Four voting is written, they will go to a second round, they will go to a third round, but in Maine or someplace like that, they don't go to the second round, they don't go to the third round. If Susan Collins won with a majority in the first round, and that was it, it was done. So you don't know what people's second, third, and fourth choices are if it's a Maine kind of election. So that's one transparency issue. I don't know if that's part of what you were talking about, Deborah. The other question is about auditing. In Colorado, we're very proud of our risk limiting audits. And Neil is the expert on that, but he's not here. And what that means is that they do a statistical random sample of ballots to make sure that what was written on the paper ballot matches the record that the computer tallied. And they don't have to pick that many ballots because it's a statistical sample. The
Uh,
tighter the margin, the more ballots you have to pick.
mhm.
And it's hard to do it for instant runoff voting, but it is possible. So people who say you can't do it, right now we can't do it in a multi-county contest because we don't have the rules for it.
Mm,
But if you can get all the ballots in one place, yes, we can do it.
okay.
So it's a matter of the Secretary of State writing the rules and regulations to make this happen, and making sure that the different counties can all coordinate. It's a huge lift.
I
So
guess I can understand, I understand the risk limited audits that we do now and how they make complete sense to do that. But that's in a plurality voting where they're just two candidates and all the ballots look the same. They're two candidates.
there
And
might be 5 candidates, but you only have to worry about the winner and the first loser. When you figure out the margin of victory, you only worry about those two. That's correct. I don't know exactly how it works here. I think they base it on the last round.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
So I mean, people will say it's not possible. It is possible. Secretary of State has to write rules about it. So, okay, Betsy. You have your hand up?
Going back to transparency, you said in Maine, people wouldn't know who the second choices, et cetera, are. So is there a provision when they report the results of ranked choice voting that they also report second place, third place choices?
So the ballot data is it's a record called a cast vote record, or CVR, cast vote record. And in Colorado, the cast vote records information is made public. The only exception is if there are, 2 people who vote in this one election, they're not going to show you those cast vote. They're not going to make those cast vote records because they want to preserve some anonymity. But in general, all the cast vote records are made public in Colorado, and that's regardless of what voting method we use. So it would include, cast vote record means the ballot data. It doesn't mean that your ballot counted. If there are 4 candidates running and you choose 2 of them, your vote won't count, but that will still be recorded on the cast vote record. So the cast vote record records your votes, your marks on the ballot. Okay, the last thing is kind of a big topic, proportional representation campaign. So I talked to somebody from the Pro Rep Coalition, and they're working toward a proportional representation initiative in California for 2028. That person described it as, we've got academics, which are the ones talking about which proportional representation voting method we should adopt. And then there's advocacy. And of course, we know that Fair Vote is a huge player in the advocacy world. They have lots of money, say, compared to approval voting, which doesn't have very much money, people don't know what it is. So, they're trying to figure out how to work those two together and come up with the best PR initiative. They're educating voters about PR, they're polling voters, they're trying to figure out how to raise money, because you can imagine in California, any initiative is going to cost a ton of money. So I suggested they also consider implementation and talk to the election officials, because, you know, this is what happened with the Kent Theory one. They didn't talk to the election officials, and then the county clerks got that amendment added to Senate Bill 24-210, which requires 12 different cities to successfully use and audit instant runoff voting before we can go statewide. So I think personally, it's really important to do the implementation well and to get buy-in from all the people. So, you know, the money is important. It's all important. So one question is, should our league work toward a proportional representation initiative in Colorado in the near future, like maybe along the same timeline as California? We could possibly piggyback off their efforts in terms of messaging, organizing, funding. We know that proportional representation is better than single member districts and single winner elections for elected bodies. But there's a lot to think about. So we might want to consider various forms of PR, not just proportional RCV, which is the one that we hear about a lot. And in Colorado statute, the technical name for PRCV is single transferable vote. That's the one that was used in Boulder for starting in 1917. An interesting thing is that many scholars and political scientist writers like Lee Drutman, Jack Santucci, Lorelei Moosberger, who worked with Matthew Schuchart, they've moved away from PRCV, and they're more interested in a party list system or mixed member proportional representation. And I can see the appeal of those because they're simple to implement. They're just choose one. Mixed member PR, you get to choose both a person and a party. So that gives you the advantages of both of those. And they're very effective for achieving PR. So
could I just interject for a minute?
Sure.
They're extremely effective at achieving PR by party. STV has some evidence that it's effective at achieving proportionality along many axes. More women get elected, more racial minorities get elected. Party list and mixed member PR don't necessarily tend towards either of those things, particularly party lists, unless the parties decide to make their list more diverse. Party list won't do anything for diversity, but there's good evidence that STV does.
Jen, you should listen to that Lorelei Moosberger talk. It's quite fascinating. She argues that STV doesn't achieve, or proportional RCV doesn't achieve a lot of the things it wants to do, it claims to do. So this is an open question, I would say right now. So one thing you might say is, why work at the state level? Why not work locally on nonpartisan city council or school board contests? And that's definitely an option. And since they're nonpartisan, there's no party involved, I would say STV/proportional RCV might be the best for nonpartisan contests. But we have been hitting a brick wall from the Secretary of State and the legislature. And what do you do when you hit a brick wall? If you live in one of these Western states with initiative options, you do what Kent Theory did, and you just go through the initiative process. Now, you know, Kent Theory has a lot of money to do that. And the League of Women Voters doesn't have a lot of money. But one thing, it might be easier to convince voters than convincing legislators. Unfortunately, I think you can convince voters of bad things too. It's easier to convince voters of bad things than legislators, but anyway, it's a big question. We don't have the millions of dollars. We need to find partners. And I would personally think we would want to find partners that the Secretary of State would listen to, because they're going to be doing the implementation. We still want to work with them to achieve successful implementation. So the question is, what are the next steps? Does the league lead? Does the league follow? I'd love to hear people's thoughts on this. It's been a bit frustrating because we know what we want, and even proportional RCV is even authorized in the state statutes, but no county clerk will run an election until the Secretary of State writes some rules to make it happen.
Does anyone know who might be running for the Secretary of State in 3 years?
Maybe I'll run, Jeff.
Ah, okay.
No, I don't know who's running.
I mean, if we could convince Jenna, you know, she's term limited now, I think. So,
By the way, does anybody know if she's had her baby?
she's on leave for it.
Oh, she is? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It was in the paper today or yesterday, I think.
That's all I have for today. I wish I had more answers. Oh, yes. Betsy said, what about watching what is happening in Portland where they're moving on this? So in Portland, they're going to use the proportional RCV. I met a candidate. He gave me a pin of a silver rose because it's the city of roses. And he, I think his name is Moses Ross. Moses, roses kind of rhymes. Anyway, it's a fascinating thing is that they have like 20 candidates running for 3 seats.
Oh.
They're not going to be able to rank 20 candidates. And in Cambridge, where they started this, they would let you rank as many candidates as there were, rank all the candidates, as many as there were declared candidates. Now they've decided 15 is enough, and 15 is probably enough. But if you limit too much, like in New York City, they limited it to 5, and I think they had 13 candidates, and something like 15% of the ballots were exhausted. So it's problematic. Jesse.
You didn't say what your opinion is of 131.
So the League of Women Voters has supported it. We're endorsing it. We don't think it's perfect. And I asked when we wrote up the ballot measure information, should I say the pros and the cons? They said, no, just write the pros. I was like, okay.
The Democratic Party, the state party has opposed it.
And the Republican Party.
Because they think it's an effort to get rid of the party system since Republicans can't win in Colorado anymore. I think that's what I've heard. I don't know.
I think that's what his intent was, is to destroy the parties.
Many people say that. I don't know.
It seems to be the agenda is to disrupt the primary system inside the 2 parties and disrupt the way the parties operate and win. So there's legitimacy to, I think, I agree with that. But at the same time, it's a very imperfect system. I think we know that.
So I wanted to show you the ballots so you could see that the primaries won't matter that much anymore
Mhm.
because 4 people will advance to the general. The general election is going to be a lot busier. It wasn't much more busy in 2018 because we had an open governor's seat. We had an open CD2 seat on the Boulder County ballot. You know, I picked that year because it was a more interesting year, but a lot of years there aren't many people running because the incumbent is running for re-election and it's kind of boring.
But the convention and assembly system will still be in the parties.
Yes,
So they still will have an inroad to the ballot.
yes. And you can still petition onto the ballot as a party member, yes.
And so I don't really understand why the parties are so worried about it, to tell you the truth. But
Generally speaking, elected officials like the system that got them elected and don't want it to change.
yeah, that sounds like elected officials. Yes.
Maggie or Rocio, do you have anything you'd like to add to this or any questions that we can try to answer?
It's certainly a lot of good information. I don't have any questions right now, but it certainly seems like the more the numbers, the more possible, like, ballot, like the more possible the ideal ballot can be. But it really is about all like getting devotees and getting people really to have a better voter turnout, pretty much.
So the video of this meeting should be posted tomorrow on the Alternative Voting Methods website. And I'm putting that in the chat right now so that anybody who wants to get it can get it.
Oh, you asked before about the things in the chat, and the only things I could see were very interesting comments and places to go to look for more information, but there weren't any questions that I could see.
Okay. Okay, well then, there I just put the Alternative Voting Methods Task Force webpage in the chat. It's also lwvcolorado.org. Go to task forces, go to alternative voting methods. Thank you, Betsy. Okay, Deborah, we're going to talk sometime. Okay. Okay, I think we can go ahead and stop the recording then. I think I can
Thank
do it
you,
right here.
Celeste.
Sure.